Hello everyone, I was at Seattle International Film Festival. It was my first year attending. There were lots of good vibes, I had a lot of fun, it was good to get out of the house, very pleasant and refreshing experience. Here's some movies I watched. Spermageddon is a Norwegian animated movie. It's kind of like a mix between Osmosis Jones and maybe Sausage Party with how profane it is. Although it is very different from those things, it has very different goals. Basically, the plot is that the sperms are trying to get to the egg, and the sperms are anthropomorphized. They're talking sperms. They're characters that are sperms. And so meanwhile, there's the human characters that are horny on a camping thing, and one of them is gonna lose their virginity, but the sperms are inside the dude, and so you get context as to what's happening. And it's kind of silly, obviously. It definitely has some charm. The opening scene was pretty funny, but past that point, it started feeling really stale. The comedic writing just wasn't nearly funny enough to hold this film together. The characters were bland and uninteresting. The beats and story structure were very cliched and derivative. And on top of that, this film also tries to be a musical, kind of. And even though there's only 4 or 5 musical numbers in the film, they were all so incredibly lame. Many of them repeated information rather than driving the story forward. The composition definitely wasn't catchy or interesting. It really felt as though every single music number just stopped the story. Like, okay, I guess we gotta wait for them to sing for a bit. And even though the movie's only an hour and 20 minutes long, it felt so much longer than that. It probably didn't help that the film's visuals were so repetitive and the color palettes were so stagnant. It is not really a visually interesting film, and that made things much less engaging than it could have been otherwise. Still, I like that this film exists. I like that it dared to be edgy and different. Like I said, this movie did have some charm, but beyond its concept, it unfortunately just was not quite there. I don't regret watching this film, but I will never see it again. So check this one out if you want. I guess don't rush to see it or anything. It was alright, and I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. I also saw a film called April. This is a drama from Georgia, the country, not the state. And there's quite a lot that I really loved about this film. It is absolutely beautifully shot. It is atmospheric. It is bold. It is interesting. It is patient and contemplative. Is that how I say that word? I'm gonna look it up.
Contemplative.
Contemplative?
Contemplative.
God damn. The root word is contemplate, right? Fuck. Jesus Christ. All right. It is patient and contemplative. Although as the film went on for me, the film went far beyond the idea of it being patient, and instead wound up feeling needlessly slow. There's a lot of shots of nothing in this film, and I guess not literally nothing, but there's many shots of characters sitting and just not saying anything. And depending on how invested in the story you are, you might get a lot out of those shots. There's definitely implications being made about what the characters are thinking and how the events of the film are affecting them, but there's quite a lot of these shots, and they go on for quite a long time, and although I enjoyed the story, I just wasn't nearly as hooked into it as I would need to be in order for those shots to work. This is a film that feels as though it's made for critics and pretty much no one else, because although it's incredibly filmed with some really fantastic sound design, it's genuinely miserable and slow to the point of it feeling borderline malicious. Again, the presentation is fantastic, and there are plenty of beautiful shots and scenes within this film, but somehow this is a 2-hour and 15-minute long movie that felt like it was 4 hours. And I'm definitely no stranger to slow cinema, but the films within that genre that I love, like Norte: The End of History, or About Dry Grasses, or Winter's Sleep, they all have so much more to chew on in terms of narrative substance, and conflict, and characters, and writing. And although this film is definitely weird, and there's aspects to it that are very interesting and memorable, there's a lot of choices within this film that just don't feel as though they're in service of anything. I applaud this film for being experimental, but I really wish it were more focused and meaningful. Also, just a warning for anyone who wants to check this film out, there's an unsimulated birth scene, very graphic, and an unsimulated C-section scene. The tone is depressing and miserable. It's definitely not for everybody. Most people will not enjoy this film. Also, shout out to the score. score. I thought the music was fantastic, and this is one of few films where I actually wish that it was used more often. It was only in a few short sections of the film, but it sounded great. Anyway, there's undeniably a lot of talent that went into making this film. I don't regret watching it, and it was definitely a unique experience, but I'm not sure I can really recommend this to anyone unless you'd heard everything I said and thought that all sounds great. Not for normies. I can't help myself. It's a good word. There's a lot that I loved about this film, but I'm never gonna watch it again. Great stuff, just not a great experience, I guess. And I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10. Another film I saw was Fuck Toys. This is the directorial debut of writer, director, and star Annapurna Suriram. I think I butchered that name. This is a bizarre alternate universe type film that is self-described as bubblegum grindhouse. So it has a similar tone to other cheesy grindhouse films, but it's a lot more femme. It has also been described as neo-camp. The film has a very retro style and is shot on 16mm. It's creative and visually interesting, and the retro grainy style gives it a lot of personality. The main character of this film is a sex worker who believes she is cursed and needs to raise $1,000 for psychics to break the curse. It was obviously pretty silly and absurdist, and it was really self-aware. The film has a really fun energy with intentionally cheesy sound effects and really great soundtrack choices. There are some humorous fake brand name placeholders throughout the film, like a beer will just say cheap beer or dad's beer. There are also lots of fun, funny, and weird characters. The DJ character was pretty extra, they were quite a lot, but it was very funny. The film was explicit, it was raunchy, there were funny situations with great setups and payoffs. I guess my biggest issues with the film would be some pacing and structure issues, and some of the performances were not as great as others, although they were still not terrible. It is also relatively small scale, and although that does add to the charm, I would love to see what she does with a bigger budget. This was a very ambitious project, and she absolutely killed it in the lead role. She knows exactly what movie she's in, and she's a very naturally funny performer. The film also had great editing, and I love that this movie was actually smart without feeling too pretentious. It definitely has a sense of meaning and purpose, and it's clear that this film was created with a lot of love and passion. It is stylistic, it is energetic, it is bold, it is daring, it is raunchy, it is explicit, and although the overall experience of this film wasn't perfect, it was overall very solid and very unique. So make sure to keep an eye on director Annapurna Sriram, probably still butchering that name. It's clear from this film that she is a powerful new voice that is sure to make more interesting films in the future. So check this one out whenever you can, and I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. Another film I saw was Souleymane's Story. This film won Best Actor at Cannes in 2024, and it follows a food delivery cyclist in Paris who is applying for asylum and has 2 days to prepare his story, and it's pretty clear that his story is not one that he actually experienced, so obviously this movie is pretty dramatic and stressful, and the way that it's written and presented just feels so incredibly genuine. The story and the way that it's told feels reminiscent of films from Jean-Pierre and Luc Dardenne. This is a very grounded and realistic story that really makes you think about the real-life people that experience this every day. And although this is reminiscent of films from the Dardenne brothers, the filmmaking presentation is actually even better. The look of this film is absolutely fantastic. The lighting, the framing, the color grading, it is all pretty pristine. The color grading is saturated without it feeling too extreme, and the 4:3 aspect ratio really adds to the feeling of urgency and feeling trapped. The majority of this film is framed very close to our main character, and the focal length stays mostly on him in a way that is similar to Son of Saul. The sound design in this film is pretty phenomenal. Not only is there an insane amount of texture and detail and atmosphere in any given scene, but they actually use the sound design as a tool to help tell the story. There are aspects of the plot that are told not through dialogue, but from the actual sound design itself. And I absolutely love when films utilize the filmmaking elements to their fullest advantage. They also chose to not include music for the majority of the film, which honestly really adds to the detailed sound design and atmosphere. I also love that they put extra effort into visual details in this film. There's a scene where he's calling a homeless shelter to register staying the night with them, and when they send him a text, you can see his phone light up, and this wasn't explicit in a way that cut to a shot of the phone. This is just a detail that you can notice, and it really adds to the authenticity of the universe. Like they actually sent a text to the phone because that's what would happen. It's a small detail, but it's an extra effort that makes the film feel more real. This film also does a fantastic job at capturing the stress and chaos of this character's situation, and each character in this film has tons of screen presence and is super memorable. This film had great editing with a structure and pacing that flowed really well, and even the pacing of conversations between characters felt like real conversations. The way they talked was like real people having a conversation rather than actors waiting for the other actor to finish their line so that they can say their line. There's a lot of talent and passion going into this film, so check this one out when it gets a North American release on August 1st. And I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. I also saw The Wailing, and no, this has nothing to do with the 2016 South Korean film by the same name. Great movie, by the way. This is a Spanish horror film, and the plot is completely different. It has nothing to do with that movie. Basically, the plot of this film is that there's a supernatural horror thing going on. People are dying, and they're being killed by a guy that you can't see unless you're looking through a device. Not any particular device, just any device, really. He shows up in the background of photos and webcams. You can only see him through cameras. Any camera, I guess, but otherwise he's invisible. Now, when the film started, I was really enjoying the opening scene. It was well shot with great editing and lighting choices, but as the film went on, it started to become a lot more annoying and a lot more cliched. In both concept and presentation, the story is just so unbearably derivative. The premise and how it's explored feels like it's been done a billion times. It doesn't really do anything better than those other films. This is unfortunately a movie that doesn't justify its own existence. Like, sure, if the style of the film was strong and unique enough, then perhaps that would outweigh how recycled it feels, but instead I found myself getting very bored and very impatient. Everything just felt way too familiar and uninteresting, and it didn't really help that all of the characters in this film were kinda just useless. Even once they understood the basics of the situation, they had no real plans or strategies to deal with it. They were kinda just dicking around like idiots, and to top it all off, the soundtrack was insanely annoying. It was often used inappropriately in ways that take away from the experience rather than adding to it, and even the composition by itself just sounded overbearing and distracting. There are one or two things in this film that I could call subversive, but by the time those things happened, I was so detached from the experience that I wasn't able to care. There was nothing special about the acting, and the overall experience was honestly just unsatisfying. It's obviously not the worst movie ever made, and there are some things that I respect about it, but ultimately, despite it being under 2 hours, it felt like a big waste of time. So probably skip this one. Very boring, very repetitive, very unspecial, and I'm giving this one a 4 out of 10. It's a high 4, if you care. It's not a 5. But it's closer to a 5 than a 3. Another film I saw was Viktor. This is a documentary produced by Darren Aronofsky, and it follows a deaf person in Ukraine during the recent Russian invasion. What really makes this documentary stand out is its style. It has a lot of interesting sounds and great sound design choices. It is also presented in black and white, presumably to emulate the feeling of a loss of sense that the subject is experiencing. And the way things are shot feels almost like a hybrid between fiction and non-fiction. It's in a similar vein to Lance Oppenheim documentaries, but not pulled off quite as well. There are some shots that wind up feeling like more of a reenactment, whether or not that's actually happening. Still, because of its unique presentation, we're able to get a lot of really fantastic looking shots. Much of the documentary is filmed clinically and stationary, and it gives it a more cinematic presentation than your typical documentary. It's also a documentary that feels very personal and intimate, and with the runtime being just under 90 minutes, it was super well paced. It was thoroughly interesting, thoughtful, and artfully presented. I also really enjoyed the music. It was thoroughly engaging without feeling overbearing. Overall, I found this film to be a really satisfying experience. It was easy breezy, simple and sweet, and over before you know it. So check this one out whenever you can, and I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. It's a high 7. It's closer to an 8 than a 6. Alright, shockingly, that is it for my Seattle Film Festival review. I actually saw more movies than this, but some film festivals have weird rules when it comes to when you can publish your reviews, so I'll be able to talk about them at some point in the future, but I just don't want to go against policy. I've been making some good health improvements in the past couple days, and I'll be sure to provide an update in the next couple of months, I think. Stay tuned for more stuff. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.